Hey Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey Josh, thanks so much for having me on. It's really exciting to be here. This is my fourth opportunity to be a guest star on a podcast. So excited to be here. Thanks.
I appreciate you coming on. From the first episode of your podcast that I heard, I thought to myself, yeah, I want to talk to this guy. And speaking of your podcast, it's called Everything STEAM, and
Yes.
STEAM is an acronym. So can you go over what that acronym stands for?
Yeah, sure. So it used to be STEM, right? Everybody thought of STEM as the science, technology, engineering, and math. But now it seems as we progress as a society, we're being more inclusive. And the root of the argument is the A is art, right? And honestly, without art, we wouldn't have science, we wouldn't have technology, engineering, or math because it's a visual or verbal representation of what you're trying to do in the science fields. So without art, STEM would be nothing. So they just said, well, let's make it more inclusive. Let's add art into the mix. Because for the longest time, the only way that we could depict the night sky was through paintings or through drawings. And then obviously photography and all these other different modes and methods. And then communication. What we're doing right now, art is communication. We're sharing ideas and knowledge back and forth. So that's STEAM. That's what I'm trying to do. And the podcast was really inspired by the effects or just the things that I've noticed through the pandemic where I think we have a lack of science communication. Not that the people that, there's obviously amazing science communicators out there, the Green Brothers, Neil Tyson, all these other different people that are out there making great videos for people to consume. But I think we're still lacking in numbers. And I think if there was better science communication, we wouldn't have had many of the issues that we did throughout the fear mongering processes of the pandemic. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. Plus, I get to talk to really great people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And usually we talk to people who are more focused on psychedelics, consciousness, mysticism, things like that, which is why I wanted to talk to someone like you because you are a physicist and a structural engineer in training. So,
Mhm.
can you talk about how far along that process you are and where you're studying?
Yeah, so not that far, believe it or not. So I'm only 24, and I've been practicing as an engineer for just over a year now. The engineer in training is just a fancy little thing by saying that I'm like in the process of shadowing other engineers that have practiced and other professional engineers. I mean, in my company, we just refer to everyone as structural engineers or just whatever discipline that you're an engineer. But the engineering training is just you're on that process to become a professional or licensed engineer. That's my goal. There's other engineers that just will never become professional engineers because they just don't feel like they want the responsibility of stamping. You have to use a lot of ethical or you have to use ethics to solve moral conflicts and stuff. And not a lot of people want to do that, which rightfully so. That's fine. But yeah, that's a path that I'm on as well. And the aspect of it, I have two degrees. I have a degree in physics and a degree in structural engineering. So physics is more of my passion. Obviously I have a passion for engineering, but I love problem solving and poking holes in society. So yeah, I love it. I love trying to understand reality. It's amazing. It's something that I don't know why you would try to be ignorant to because it's just it's way more fascinating than something that we could sit here and kind of cook up on our own. It's beautiful. Nature's beautiful. So yeah, physics and engineering is my life. Love mathematics. Honestly, like since I've been out of school, I've dove into a lot of different things. Like I've been studying the process of evolution a lot and other different things within the sciences. Geology, love geology. I love hiking, so when I go out there, I'm always collecting rock to take back and show through like TikToks and videos. So yeah, I just enjoy science, man.
Yeah, and you can really tell that translates in your TikToks and in your podcast as well. You have um, a very special sort of way of expressing your interest,
Ooh.
which I do really appreciate. But yeah, something I really wanted to talk to you about. The timing with you coming on has been perfect because we just got the first images of the James Webb Space Telescope, which are just amazing. So, what were your first feelings emotionally when you saw those images?
Butterflies. Other people have shed tears. I had butterflies. I was, it's in my opinion, it's one step closer, or it's one, I guess, step further towards being more of an intelligent species, understanding reality. I mean, it's just, and honestly, actually, the vast majority of the butterflies came to the realization of just the millions of people that have, dedicated their lives and time to the James Webb Space Telescope, because it took a long time, right? Well over a decade. I'm sure that they were, even just the science that went into it before any of the engineering could take place, where you had to develop the understanding of infrared technology. How can we harvest infrared? How can we even understand gravitational lensing like we did with that galaxy cluster image? That was gorgeous. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so great to see this, take fold. And honestly, it's the future. The future's happening right now. We're gonna get fingers crossed that it's just like Hubble, where it lasts way longer than we projected, and we get so much information out of it. And it's just gonna help us out as a civilization. As it just, I'm still getting butterflies. It's amazing,
Yeah,
gorgeous.
yeah. It's so amazing. And so, as I understand, like you said, the James Webb telescope was infrared technology, and the Hubble was ultraviolet, right? So, what makes infrared so much more accurate than ultraviolet?
So the Hubble Space Telescope was visible light, and they, with a touch of ultraviolet. Now, with the James Webb Space Telescope, it's more near infrared and infrared. So when I say near infrared, it's like really red shifted light on the electromagnetic spectrum. So if you think about it on an energy scale, right, we're looking at less energetic wavelengths in the James Webb Space Telescope, where the Hubble Space Telescope was looking at something that was more energetic. So something that's more blue shifted, possibly moving towards us, whereas red shifted, we could see more things moving away from us. So that's why we were able to use gravitational lensing to see these galaxies that were moving away from us. They're 13.5 billion years into the past. So really, what the difference is between a telescope is what we can see in the most lay terms, what we can see, what we can image. So we're adding onto. That's why we're taking the same images that Hubble did, because now we can add on to the information that was already there. We get a better picture of what's going on. And one really cool thing about the the name drop that I gave about the galaxy cluster image. I don't remember the exact galaxy cluster now, but anyways, if you were to walk outside with a grain of sand in your fingers, in between your fingertips, and hold it out at arm's length, that's the same relative piece of sky that the James Webb Telescope was looking at. And there's thousands of galaxies there. Obviously, Hubble did the same thing, just in different wavelengths, different information. But isn't that just fascinating? There's thousands of galaxies just in one small image, and we're able to look at gravitational lensing and see something almost back to where the birth of the universe started. Well, we're obviously not going to see the primordial soup of the beginning of the universe, but we can see up to that, where we start to see coalescence of the four fundamental forces. So
Yeah,
amazing.
it's amazing. So we're seeing like essentially the first inclinations of light that come to us, right? Because we can't see anything beyond the light that makes its way to us from 13, 14 billion years ago. So how long was the Big Bang ago? How long did they say that was?
Oh, geez. So that was 13.5. And I think it was between 13.5 and 14 billion years ago. That number is a little ambiguous because it's tough to map, but I mean, it's within that range. There's
Mhm.
a level of uncertainty there. But ultimately, like what I said, it's really tough to go back in time to the primordial era because there's nothing to image. It's vastly theoretical, but backed by an unbelievable amount of science and mathematics. Yeah.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about the nature of reality on this show, where humans are going, where consciousness is going, what stages of evolution, have yet to be shed upon us. So this is a very broad question, but in your field, what do you think some of the most important things that physics and structural engineering can tell us about where humanity is heading?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, to distinguish between the two, physics is kind of answering the questions and the phenomena, like why does this happen? How can we measure it? What is it? Kind of the deal. And engineering takes that information and then puts it into practice. So it's kind of like the entire spectrum of what we need to understand and manipulate reality to certain situations, not even just for us, but just in general. Selfless and selfish acts, I guess, is probably a good way to put that. In terms of where we're heading with those, uh, my projection of humanity is maybe a little more bleak, I guess. It's not fear mongering by any means. It's just backed upon scientific data. So one thing that I like to say, and I've been pondering about this a lot lately, is that so with the amount of species that have been alive on Earth, that have existed on Earth for the last 3.8 billion years, 99.9% of them have perished or went extinct. So the the numbers aren't that
Yeah,
good looking,
not a good
uh,
sign.
but it doesn't, it doesn't mean that we have to be in that category, right? The point, 0 1 or the point 1 there is, think about it as like sharks. Sharks have survived the last 5 mass extinctions. I don't know if they'll survive this one, but they've survived the last 5, which is amazing. They've been around for 400 plus million years. It's insane. There's other species that are like that, and it's quite possible with the fact that we're able to use fiction through a beautiful chance of mutation is another reason why we're sitting here talking through microphones. So maybe that's an exception to that 99.9%. Who knows? Right now, it's looking very interesting. We're at a very interesting crossroads of climate change, and I know that's obviously a hot button topic, but I think if we can overcome our fiction in a lot of ways, because fiction's great. I mean, it's the reason why we're here. But if we can kind of decipher what's fiction and what's fact, and get over certain geopolitical differences, I think we can outlast at least anthropogenic climate change, because there's a big difference between anthropogenic and natural. Natural is, I mean, both of them are very scary, of course, because we have certain limits as a species, at least biologically. So I think if we can do those base level things, get over like our differences, then we'll be good, and science will help. Will definitely help with that. Not so as much physics, but biology will answer those questions. Engineering will try to tackle the problem at hand, and it's already there. Like the technology is already there to do that. It's it's just interpersonal relationships is what's the header at the moment. But yeah, I'm hopeful, but I'm also a realist about where humanity's moving towards. Technology, love it. Like excited about it. Of course, not as much as technological waste. Like I think sustainability is the future. Technology is obviously the future for progression of us, because we still have a lot of subcategories to answer in terms of moving forward. But I think physics is really just understanding reality, and I think we've done a really good job of that so far. Obviously, we don't know core concepts of why, like for example, electromagnetism. We can see its effects, but we don't know why the hell it happens. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to be answered, but like we've answered a lot of the stuff that like gave us buildings and cars and better food for us, or uh, different things that have made life a little bit easier. So, I don't know if that, I don't know if that skirted your question a little bit. Hopefully, I had some good answers in there. But it's hard. I mean, that's a tough question. That's a tough
Yeah, that's
question
why
to
I say yeah, it's
answer.
a very broad question. And what
Yeah,
it seems like thematically within your answer was prominent is that we are in control of our future, which to me is hopeful. So that being said, is there anything, or there may be a few things that you think that people, the general public, uh, doesn't really pay much attention to in terms of maybe biology or physics that we should be learning more about that will sort of maybe broaden our sense of what reality is and what our relationship to it should be?
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the clickbait answer, from any person who loves science is evolution. Uh,
Hmm.
I keep seeing these comments of people that like are anti-evolution and are like, scientists will do everything that they can to plug evolution in every answer. That's because it is pretty much every an answer to every question.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so like a good example of that is understanding that we're all Homo sapien, like studying evolution. That we why we look different, why we behave different culturally is a process of evolution, right? Why I'm white, other people are black, other people have different eye structures. It's all based on an evolutionary process. And once we can kind of understand the basic science of that across the majority, we'll treat people equally, consciously and unconsciously. Unconscious is the biggest one, because once you become conscious, you're aware of what you're really saying. But like unconscious is why we still have a lot of embedded issues socially. But if we can have that, I think we'll be able to answer a lot of social questions, which will lead to a lot of breakthroughs in science, because that's where a lot of barriers are in science. So if we can grasp evolution better and have maybe more understanding communication of evolution, it'll fare well for us. Another thing, I wanted to jump back just really quick because you said that we do have control of what happens. Not exactly. I mean, maybe with technology and stuff, but then we're also hampered by resources and natural phenomenon, right? Because I mean, natural phenomenon is quite scary, and we are like understanding like climate. We're able to model a lot of things, but like the theory, like the chaos theory is a thing. Like chaos is something that it's hard to model, it's hard to understand. Like uh if you break things down in reality, it's much more chaotic and uncertain, than you would like to think, because like it's ignorance. Can we use um I don't, it's hard to explain, but really reality is a lot more chaotic than what you're told. And it's to a degree unpredictable. So we have to be aware of that as a species, and I think a lot of people are. So yeah, can we answer a lot of questions socially? Sure, but like a lot of natural phenomenon could be the ideal end of humanity as well. So you have to be humble about it. Spending
Yeah, and
time
that's sort
wisely.
of a it sort of reminds me of even just jumping right back to what we were talking about with understanding evolution. It seems to shed light on our relationship to nature, and that to me is a very important part of how we end up deciding to progress, whether it comes to climate change, industrialization. Um, so, climate change.
Yeah.
How much of that, because it's hotly debated, how much of that do you, in your vision, is in control of our like, is within our control and caused by us?
Oh, so I just met with a climatologist and a couple weeks ago, before my vacation, and we were talking about climate change, natural versus anthropogenic. And he said that the rate of temperature versus time is actually 106% our fault.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I never thought about it that way, right? Because you think of 100% being a cap of something, but not exactly if you're talking about rates of change. Because to be to fully explain that way people aren't going, that's bullshit. What are you saying? Uh, we're we're in a localized downslope of temperature. We should be naturally, where it's caused by the Milankovitch cycle. And if anybody wants to look up what the Milankovitch cycle is, go for it. But anyways, we were on the downward trend towards a trough of the cycle, which means it's a localized, not because we're in an interglacial period. We were just in a localized cooling period. It's not that we were in a glacial period, just interglacial. So we're warm, but we're still localized cold. If that makes sense. We're heading towards a trough. We're supposed to be getting colder and colder. I think for the next 10 to 15,000 years, something of that order of magnitude. But the problem is, as we were going on that downslope towards the localized minimum, we actually took a big turn and leveled out the rate of change to where now we're actually increasing in temperature. And that's where people are talking about this 1 degree C, 2 degrees C, 3 degrees C. It's because we went to a point where we stopped getting colder and we started getting warmer. So that's that 106%. If it was 100%, it means that it completely stopped the rate of change and we're just kind of like level, but now we're starting to move up. And what bothers me is that if we skip the whole process of heading towards the trough and just start heading, you know, towards a positive rate of change, I don't know if humanity's quite capable of reacting to that, because we've been developing as a society since the agricultural revolution in a cooling period rather than a warming period. So I don't know what that, well, we have ideas, but we don't know the total effects of what that would do with anthropogenic and natural, especially if we didn't do anything about anthropogenic. So that's where a lot of people are like hitting the oh shit button, which is understandable, but I'm not here to fearmonger, right? Because there's a lot of technology that could help us out, base level science that could help us out in at least, doing something about anthropogenic climate change. And then we can learn from that and then understand what we can do about natural climate change in the future. So it's hopeful, but it's also a realist point of view that, this is what's going on.
Yeah, it seems to go back to socially what we're capable of actually putting into change, like putting into progress.
Yeah.
And politically, unfortunately, it's where all these things start with legislation. And it doesn't seem like our governments are willing to put anything into action because there's so many businesses, corporations that are so used to making a profit based off of particularly what they're doing, which happens to be detrimental
Yeah.
to the climate.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think, and a lot of people don't like this, especially the people who are anti, capitalist, which I get it, to a fair degree. But with respect to like with climate change and answering the bell, uh, we need it. Like 100% we need it because we
Hmm.
need fast action change. And if you can do something with policy, say like with carbon taxation, water taxation, carbon credits, huh, if we could implement carbon credits, then we would incentivize, these big businesses to change and sell carbon credits. So like, oh, we could make more money by changing what we do and by selling carbon credits to other companies that don't want to change yet. So it's incentivizing the dollar and incentivizing inventions to, make more money. So money's not everything, but like it is in this idealism, right? Because you'll birth amazing technology, birth a movement, an actual green movement, not this bullshit greenwashing that we get, and also taking advantage of economics to do it. I can make more money, so let's do it this way. And
And
that's
I totally agree. I think that is such a great distinction between taxing and incentivizing.
yes,
You know, from a judgment perspective, I feel like in concept, if you're judging something, whether good or bad, based off of like punishment or like taxation, there's sort of a negative connotation that comes with that as opposed
Yeah.
to incentivizing, because incentivizing is just inherently positive. So, in my view, I think that's the way
Yeah.
that we should proceed.
Yeah, and we'll probably get a little bit of both. I'm hoping more for the incentivization, but even with incentivizing it, they still have to change. So, I mean, I think we would still end up feeling some effects because, of course, as we know it, the middle lower class always feels change
Yeah.
in that manner. We're always paying for it, but I think that it would be a shorter period in which we would have to pay out for it, rather than just taxing them. And it's just not the answer. In my opinion, it should be like, heavily incentivized. But I still think with policy, right, where it's hard to lean on policy for a win. So just expect both at this
Yeah,
point.
which is why it's like it looks bleak because again, we're relying on, politicians that have lost our trust
Yeah.
and it just seems like things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, 100%. I want to shout out a book that I'm reading right now, and it's called Sapiens. Have you heard about it?
I have heard this book actually, yeah.
Yeah, A Brief History of Humankind. Great book.
Mhm.
Love it. One thing that the author really breaks down is the fact that society is built on fiction ideas. And one point that he made was beautiful is that all these amazing kingdoms and dynasties have fell over time because over time people start to get tired of the fiction that they created and which sewn society together. The fiction is usually like, oh, it's freedom under God or freedom under this divine right, or saying or kind of manipulating a bunch of people to understand or to come together. That's the only way that like 383 million people can be sewn together is through fiction. Like without fiction, we would still be acting like chimpanzees and bonobos, where you can only be in a large enough group to where you start to subdivide and overthrow the already in power, overruler, right? So with fiction, we were able to create, cities, kingdoms, dynasties, etc. And each one of those have failed over time based upon the majority wanting to change this fiction because they find out that this fiction is a false reality. So, in my opinion, with the way that we talked about, where's the projection of humanity, it'll continue to repeat that 100%. And I don't want to jump ahead at all, but like I just want to put a precursor here that I think artificial intelligence will 100% help us change the way that we look at a fictionized society. We'll be able
That's
to say that is
exactly
bullshit.
that's where exactly where I was going. I was going to ask you the same. I was going to go down the same line. What I was going to say is exactly the same thing. I think that AI is the thing that corrects our fiction, and a lot of people are scared of AI. I am not one of them. I think that AI is a beautiful thing. I think it was William James who said a while ago. A quote he said was, human beings are the sex organs of the technology world or something along those lines. And I love that. It's almost like we're unconsciously building something that like we don't even know what its potential is, but I
Mhm.
feel its potential is just through the roof.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like interactions socially, just even like look for example. I don't mean to plug Elon like every single engineer in this world would, but his company. Honestly, I'm more excited about the people who work for them than him himself. But the like Neuralink, like I'm actually really excited about that. One, because of its health implications, what it can do for people who are paraplegic, people who are blind, people who have Alzheimer's, etc. That's huge. That's huge for humanity. It's going to project, like progress life, make life a lot longer, more, not even making life longer, but making life better, you know? And then also being able to cognitively share ideas with others and increasing a human's intellect is just a great thing, right? And with that, you can bypass or at least understand what's fiction versus what's fact. And that's what in my opinion, that's what's going to say in my opinion, but honestly, like with the trends that I've seen, it's what's going on right now. People are having a really tough time, especially with the not downfall, but with a problem that we have in our education system, at least here in the United States. We're having a hard time deciphering what's fact and what's fiction, what's misinformation, what's information. And with a corporation of something like Neuralink, or just a device like that, it doesn't have to be Neuralink. I think there's unprecedented things that could come to benefit us. Sure.
Do you think there's a certain amount of responsibility and maturity that a species should have before they start to get involved with something like a Neuralink in terms of maybe like a institutionalized organization taking advantage of it?
Oh man, that's so hard because we don't know, right? We're from what we understand, we're the only species on this planet that understands or tries to predict the future and try to relive the past, because we're fiction based and it's all based on a chance of genetic mutation, right? Like it, we have no basis of knowledge to go off of. We're inventing everything based on our interpretation of reality. So it's really tough to say whether we're doing it right or wrong. Honestly, like, so Neil Tyson, I mean, he has a really good way of putting it, right? Because what we do as human beings, with what I said, with the prediction of the future and interpreting or reliving the past, right? Memories in that way, and fiction is something that technically is not needed for survival, right? Evolution has shown that you need like camouflage and body armor and you know different like social interaction of being able to communicate in many different ways. But nowhere do we need to have fiction. Like, but we do. So it's we could be uh very like, obviously it's a genetic mutation, but like we could be one of the few in the entire cosmos that owns that, just because it's not necessary, but it happened because evolution is by chance, not by a set precursor. So I'm sorry. Do you mind asking that question again? I just wanted to push. I wanted to plug that before I started
Yeah.
anything else.
Well, what you just said sort of leads me to, like you mentioned earlier, a type 1 civilization.
Oh yeah.
So, as I understand, there's type 1, type 2, type 3.
Mhm.
So, what will, in your view, like, do you see any of the beginnings of us becoming sort of the next inclination of uh, like civilization?
Mm, if we continue to again, this is such a hard thing to answer, but I think if we battle what could possibly make us become extinct, we'll definitely get there. And the biggest thing that's staring us in the face right now is obviously climate change. As a species, as us, right? Not as every single species on the planet, but just as a species in general with respect to climate change. Because things get pretty crazy when stuff gets warm, and we haven't really experienced that much. So I think yes, like with the development of artificial intelligence and being able to decipher fact versus fiction, also being able to have a cognitive boost, in intelligence through artificial intelligence. I think so. I think so because one thing that I am really excited about is artificial intelligence replication. And the big topic today is we're in the next revolution of space travel, like where we're trying to become interplanetary, and for good reason. A lot of people hate it. Obviously there is no planet B. This is the most ideal habitable situation, even though arguably Earth is not that great to be inhabiting, if you study the science. But we need it for a safe haven, right? We need a backup plan because a lot of things can happen that could put us into a big situation, or a big problem. So being able to go to Mars and send, or the moon, et cetera, and send artificial intelligence to create like a habitable place is ideal, because humans aren't going to go and be out in the radiation that gives you cancer like that and be able to put up structures and microclimates, right? So if you wanted to do that and wanted to have a safe haven for humans as a backup plan, artificial intelligence can do that. Also, artificial intelligence with transportation, with health, with just literally, I mean, it's just so endless. I mean, it doesn't have to take your job. It doesn't, it's actually an enhancement rather than a hindrance to humanity. And the problem is it's this whole mysticism and fictionized push where it's fear mongering all the lay people that don't know much about artificial intelligence.
Honestly,
That's a
I wish it would take my job, freeing me up for some things that I would rather do. Um, and I do see that as a vast improvement upon our economy and our
problem.
social civilization in the future too. A lot of these jobs that we do all the time, a lot of these jobs that people, you know, quote unquote, waste their life away doing. We dedicate the best years of our life to 8 hours a day of working, and
Yeah.
usually in a job that doesn't fulfill us. So
Yep.
something I see happening is artificial intelligence taking over some of those mundane jobs, some of the things that that we do in factories. Obviously, we see robotics coming to fruition,
Mhm.
and just freeing us up to be people. To
Yeah.
define that A part in STEAM more, and that I think is a beautiful part of what science is starting to adopt.
Yeah. 100%. The person who works 60 hours a week running for strawberries in the strawberry patch, right? At probably below minimum wage. Uh, it could be greatly, changed by artificial intelligence, by complete, not even direct but indirect impacts, right? Getting intelligence about a certain, say, like, obviously they come over here, unfortunately the vast majority of people that do such jobs like that in the United States are people who come over here, immigrate over here to do that. So getting artificial intelligence of like where they come from and understanding their situations and increasing their quality of life there will keep people from having to do those disgusting and backbreaking jobs that they just don't even get to enjoy life. Why should I experience life at a greater magnitude than that person? You have no answer to it, right? I mean, if you did, and if it was a negative answer, yeah, you have no morals, But to jump back to I guess completely answer the are we heading to type one? I think on an energy perspective we are, for the most part. I mean, obviously that's geopolitics and then just nation politics, but like I think with technology and where we're heading and the idealism of what we need to do, I think we are, because type one deals with, can we harvest and understand and fully develop the energy in which is given to us naturally? Sun, obviously, fusion, uh, wind, geothermal, tidal, and then other things that a lot of people don't think about, but like physicists love to think about, is how can we take a hurricane and harness a hurricane's energy? How can we take a tornado and harness a tornado's energy? How can we look at earthquakes and get energy from an earthquake? So I think we're on the way. We're starting to see uh, tidal energy being put in coastal regions, where it makes sense. We're starting to see more offshore solar. We're starting to see solar being put in places that make sense. um, you know, it it's getting there. It really is. So type one civilization is on the radar. It's just a matter of incentivizing it again. Do we want to really pursue this? Because honestly, it's more economical, and it's actually more. I guess you get better profit from it, in my opinion. Honestly, I heard this on a podcast from man, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was a scientist, and he was talking about how if you were to take the U.S. budget, and take 1 year's budget of the military budget, which is like 450, $480 billion. I mean, you can fact check that. It's probably around that, give or take. You could you could actually green green re-incentivize the energy grid of the United States 6 to 7 times, and we would be good. We don't.
The technology's there.
Yeah,
It's just we have to decide to make that jump, right?
yeah, yeah. So we're close. I think the estimate was that we're at like a point 0.7, and obviously like a point 0.7 civilization. So between 0 and 1, and then 1 is obviously a type 1 civilization where you completely encompass the energy of the natural surroundings of Earth, and then obviously the sun, and then also interplanetary travel. We're getting there. We're getting there. It's just estimates. I think Michio Kaku said it was like, give it 100 years. But then there's
Mm.
also other scientists, and like the late and great Stephen Hawking said that, we might be gone by 2100. And so like there's, who knows, we're on the brink. That's why I said I think we're hitting the barrier, and I think artificial intelligence is the answer. I do.
Yeah, I'm confident. I think humans are awesome and we find a way. And
So,
that brings me to something that we've been thinking about and talking about quite a bit on this podcast. I just released
mm,
an episode actually about it, which would be UFO and UAPs,
yeah.
and just the whole phenomenon of a potential advanced civilization being either outside of us and coming from space, interplanetary, intergalactically, or potentially even residing here on Earth in our oceans and things like that. So, what are your sort of views on this phenomenon?
So first of all, a really cool term that I think is fun is, the transportation of and the inhabitants of aliens on here is like panspermia, like that
Ah, I
life was
love that.
yeah. That's
Mhm.
a cool thing, and I love the name of it. But my thought, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts, and again, there's a lot of avenues of which could happen. But just the sheer, I mean, we talked about the James Webb Space Telescope, just the thousands and thousands of galaxies that were in the area at arm's length of a grain of sand. You know what I mean? Like, and then those galaxies, of course, like the Milky Way galaxy, have hundreds of millions of stars, which have planets probably at each solar system, right? Each star system. Sorry, let me rephrase. Solar is based on Sol, which is our sun. That's egotistic of me, but to just like think about the sheer number of possible planets out there that have that could have biological signal, that could be within a habitable zone. Honestly, you don't even need to be in a habitable zone, and that's something that we're figuring out with the water worlds that are in our solar system, like Titan, Enceladus, Europa, Ceres, and many others. There's a phenomenon called tidal interaction, where you have a core that's expanding and contracting because it's moving around a mass, like a large mass like Jupiter or Saturn, where it's creating energy and heat. And if you know anything about like underwater volcanoes, where it expels this heat, right? Because the heat has to go somewhere. And what we're seeing is that there's underwater or undersurface oceans on these planets. So we call them water worlds, where they're capped off usually by an ice. And ice is not just subject to water; it's subject to the different materials. And it caps it off. And what it does is it creates a crust that has an underlayer ocean. So what we're doing, or what they're doing, is trying to send missions within the next decade, and obviously further, to see if there's biological life there. And there's a lot of atmospheric gases that we're seeing that tell the tale of biological signals. So we don't have to just be a terrestrial world in a habitable zone like Earth. It could be, there's many possibilities out there. So for anybody to sit here and say that we're alone, you're living under a rock and you're ignorant. Just saying.
Straight up.
Just saying. So,
And I think on your last podcast, you had mentioned this, and it was like one of the first things I thought of when you talk about the planet that has those bodies of water inside that's encapsulated by ice. You think of an igloo, and ice is just one of the best thermal insulators that
insulators.
there are. So,
Yep.
I mean, who knows what's under that ice?
100%. Yep. And I agree. And honestly, like this is another thing that I was watching a video from Michio Kaku. I love that guy. But
He's
anyways,
great.
he is. And he was kind of saying like, we evolved on Earth. We organisms evolved on Earth based upon certain atmospheric conditions. But that doesn't conjugate life, right? Life has certain things that come together and coalesce through energy and different, the making simple single celled life into multicellular life. But that doesn't have to do with the atmospheric conditions, right? We could, like, they could have a different system in which they have evolved to intake and project out and not be affected by ethane and methane and other what we consider to us really dangerous things. So, like I said before, evolution is not something that you can predict, right? It's something that just happens. It is based upon chance and mutation. So if you can coalesce single-celled life into multicellular life, there's bound to be evolved organisms on these planets that can undergo different processes based upon its environment. So yeah, there's many different opportunities out there. That's why you get all these interesting different like science fiction characters that can and can't breathe air on certain planets because they've evolved differently. But the base level science is saying that that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing to even think about.
Yeah.
And that begs the question, how would we even know then? Like, is there a type of, because I mean, we can only observe what we can take in through our senses, and our
Mhm.
senses are based upon our evolutionary biology. So how can we even be sure that these things are even like sensible according to how we perceive information? I mean, they could be, interdimensional, which brings consciousness into play, and what is consciousness? How does it emerge from, parts that by themselves don't really mean much, but then when you
Mhm.
put them together, some sort of consciousness that, emerges from it? And how important is that to life? I mean, how do you see like a single-celled organism as inhibiting consciousness?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that question. I would say consult a neuroscientist or something, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, that's tough. Uh, like I said before we started this recording, it's like you go into a library and you see four bookshelves full of stuff about what is consciousness. Have we answered consciousness and stuff? But then you go to like a physics shelf and it's like there's like four books,
Mhm.
where like it's tough. It really is. I don't I don't contemplate what consciousness is. I contemplate the effects of consciousness, like between like human to human interaction. Like what we talked about before is like, could AI help us decipher, our unconscious and conscious behavior to decipher between fact and fiction? So I would like to say consciousness is very interesting. At one point in my time, I thought consciousness was cyclic, just like everything else is pretty much cyclic in the universe. But I don't know. That's really tough. That's a tough answer. But to where you were talking about human senses suck, man. They're terrible,
Yeah.
like biologically terrible. For instance, from what we have discovered on the electromagnetic spectrum, we can only see 0.0035% of it. I think it's point zero. It's either three zeros or two zeros. Now I'm psyching myself out. But either way, it's an unbelievably small amount. And that's what we call visible light spectrum. Everything else is just noise to us. We can't, or just non-existent to us without technology. like the James Webb Space Telescope, Hubble, etc., were able to understand, at least take data and then put it into visible light, right? Because what you saw from the James Webb Space Telescope images were things that were converted from near infrared, infrared into visible light. So you and I could go, whoa, that's wild. Or olfactory glands for smell sucks compared to so many other species. Our our sense of taste, not that great. Our sense of touch, eh. Like we're a pretty mundane species, and if it wasn't for fiction, we sure as shit would not be here having this conversation. So yeah, I mean, honestly, before we had a cognitive revolution between 30 and 70,000 years ago, we were merely, and even way before that, before we kind of developed bipedalism in that realm between 2.1 and about 70,000 years ago, we were mostly like scavengers, where we were mid range on the food chain, where we had to wait our turn in terms of if there was something dead out there, we had to wait until the lions did the kill, the hyenas scavenged, and then we were like the after. We were like shooing off the vultures to go have a meal. Uh, you know, it's a little annoying and egotistic to think that we're like the all superior things. It just so happened to be that we can interpret and project fiction. So yeah, humans are great. Obviously, every organism has its impeccable things, but we're just humans. And with respect to like aliens in other regions, like I said, it might be that this is like a running hypothesis. I'm not going to say theory because it hasn't been proven, but hypothesis that, like I said before, the fact that we can do fiction is just based on chance, where there might not be intelligent species within the Milky Way, but there might be one like within Andromeda, maybe. Hard to tell. Hard to tell. But we're looking for those signs, right? But even with the signs of what we're doing now is obviously really hard to detect, and something that only travels at the speed of light. So there's something 4 light years away. It takes 4 years for us to receive that information. And obviously, if you leave the Milky Way, which the Milky Way is 100 million light years across. It's 100 million years in which you could receive information from, say, on the other side of the Milky Way without it being completely distorted by interactions. So it's a perplexing thing. Is there life? It's almost guaranteed. But is there intelligent life? And are they already gone? Because you could send a signal 100 million years into the past, they're 100 million years in the past, we're getting it. But then who's to say, because most things don't last 100 billion years. Like I said, 99.9% of species on Earth have went extinct, with the exception of sharks and other certain things. So the possibilities are small in that aspect, but the fact that life happens, biology happens, is unprecedentedly strong. So I hope that I
Yeah.
mean, that's I keep throwing out these really clickbait and skirting around the answer or skirting around the question answers, but I hope I'm contributing to something.
Oh, no, you absolutely are. No, you definitely are. And that's the type of questions that I'm asking you are unanswerable questions. It's basically spitballing and,
Mhm.
theorizing or hypothesizing, not theorizing.
Mhm.
Um, and another one that I can throw at you is do you think they're here? And if they are here, does physics support that in any way?
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess I only talked about information travel. I didn't even talk about like actual biology being able to travel. Because one thing that we have to understand, and through special relativity, I guess not we already understand it as like a civilization, but from person to person, we have to understand special relativity, right? Because as you start to travel towards the speed of light, you have to lose mass to be able to do that, because photons travel at the speed of light. and they're completely massless. They're just pure packets of energy. Whereas, like as you start to travel at that speed, the force becomes so great in which literally biology becomes ripped into particles. So the only way in which that could happen, which is it's only hypothesized, is like, gravity well, or the other possibility is through wormholes, which is something that is completely theoretical.
Hmm.
Like Einstein's, relativistic equations do predict wormholes, but they're, completely something erratic, right? It's we have no idea. We don't even know if they exist. We haven't seen them yet. But I mean, like they predicted black holes, and there's black holes. We imaged one. We've imaged multiple now. So I mean, it's possible, but like just to be able to even go through a wormhole is also unpredictable. Where's it going to go? It's just pinches in space time. You have a hole here and a hole here. Am I going to end up over here? Am I going to end up over here? Who knows? So like that's hard to do. Gravity wells is being able to warp space time. So like how a black hole can warp space time to where it's like rips in the fabric of space time. If you think about it in a 2D sense, obviously in a 3D sense, it's just a big elongated pothole, or like say a lava tube would maybe be a
Hmm.
better way to think about it. If you were to like, there's people that have been working on the gravity well situation for a long time, for decades, I guess, decades, not a long time, decades. And the possibility of creating warps in space-time through spaceships would what it would essentially do is, if you're warping space-time through gravitational what do I say, gravitational wells, you can also move through time faster. It's kind of like skipping the whole I don't need, I need to be massless to be able to travel towards the speed of light. It's being able to move through time a lot faster. And also with time, also because time is part of the fabric, you're moving from point A to point B faster as well because you're curving it. So those are two things that are greatly theorized, but like obviously not anywhere near in fruition yet. It doesn't mean, I guess it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But that would be like literally the only way that biology could make it to Earth and be here. So the chances of that are like really, really, really slim. I'm more exercising the fact that they're in existence, but like for them to be here, it's like exponentially decreasing towards not like a reality, right? Because one, you have to be intelligent, so you have to jump through all of these barriers. You know, are you destroying yourself as a society? Are you incorporating technology? Are you overcoming the natural processes of the planet in which you are residing on? Can you figure out the cosmos? Can you manipulate space time to be able to get from A to B? And those are huge, obviously. Like we're zero point 0.7 on the scale, on this fictitious scale that we've made. So the the possibility drops off, but like I mean, there's still a possibility, right?
And yeah, the potential manipulation of space time, just that in itself is fascinating to even
Sick.
theorize or even
Yeah.
hypothesize, because how in the world would you even go about that? And when people talk about traveling through a black hole, maybe it's just my ignorance, but if you can't even get like close enough to the sun without like being, burned up and obliterated, how in the world can you even get close to a black hole without just being torn apart and turned into just like particles?
Well, even that, you talk about the sun, especially with like heat resistance, right? If you get towards the event horizon, you're incinerated. It's
Hmm.
on the orders of trillions and trillions of degrees Celsius. So like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just outrageous.
yeah. So like, if you get near the event horizon, you're getting cooked before you even like you become a plasma, right? Plasma is a state of matter, and then it doesn't matter from there. You're just all particle matter, and obviously particles aren't conscious. So like, how are you supposed to like? It just goes into um, an infinite, not infinite. We say infinite, like black holes aren't infinite mass. Like they're still quantifiable mass, but like to the human brain, it's infinite mass, where you just become pushed into a singularity. And the really fun thing about black holes, which is so exciting, is the fact that since black holes create rips in the fabric of space-time. I keep throwing these asterisks on there because we think of it in two-dimensional, where it's three-dimensional. But it has this punching effect through space-time where if you were in a black hole, you could see the entirety of the universe in which you reside in play out because time does not exist now because it punches through time. Gorgeous. And then there's
Yeah.
also the theory that, like, if you're in there in the black hole in its center point, you could look one way in which the universe is unfolding in eternity, in eternity, and on the other end you could look at another universe in its entirety starting. That's cute. It's beautiful, but like, how would you even know that?
Yeah, I mean, this is starting to it gets to the realm of like just absolute unknowability and just
Yeah, yeah.
again, fiction, it's based off of a fiction that we tell ourselves that is based in, the five senses that we have to interpret reality through. So, how do you
Yeah.
even know?
Yeah, good point. I forgot to say this earlier. So the reason why we are here today is because we use fiction, but what fiction does is it's trying to we're trying to predict something. We're using our imagination, and what imagination does is it gets people curious and excited to tackle a problem. And then once that happens, that's where we incorporate science, right? So mysticism creates science, and then science solves the problem, and then it should never be mystified again. But it is. For some reason, the majority of people, they accept the science. It's an objective truth. We move on. But there's still some people that use mysticism in the place of science, which it bothers the hell out of me. But honestly, mysticism is the reason why we know the things that we know today, right? If it wasn't for if it wasn't for Mr. Newton saying, "Well, okay, this apple fell in front of me. Why isn't the moon falling onto me?" We wouldn't have had him create the calculus, well, portions of calculus in the times. I think it was it the Black Plague? I can't remember, but it was one of the times where there was a plague going on, and he sat down and he developed calculus to be able to create his theory of gravity.
Man,
Like,
what a G. Who does
what a
that,
G.
right?
Yeah, yeah, what a G. I mean, obviously, he wasn't right about everything, but it was his mysticism that created, the curiosity, which then created the science. And now that science is an objective truth baked into society, which is beautiful. And I know, whenever we first had an email exchange, you wanted to talk about mysticism and, science, how they come together. I had to think about that throughout my entire 17-day trip to Alaska. And I'm like, yeah, Sir Isaac Newton, let's talk about him. Or let's just talk about how mysticism becomes science. And it does. We have to be creative. You don't see a bonobo trying to understand gravity, right? Because they don't have the capabilities of creating fiction. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be doing that. We would still be scavenging in fields or possibly extinct, because that's, we were out fictionizing and being able to create social groups better than any other hominid species. Hence why we're the only ones left, because biologically, the way that we progressed from bipedalism was stupid. But that's why they went extinct, right? And that's why Homo sapiens are here today, is because we have the ability to create fiction, have mysticism, create tools, which better helps our survival.
Yeah, man. And, it really does seem to me that mysticism and science are, two sides of the same coin. At one point in my life, I was a staunch atheist. I thought, science is the only way. Anything else is just conjecture, imagination, and story. And then psychedelics came into my life and spirituality came into my life. And it blew apart my notion of what mysticism could possibly be. And then what happened in my mind was sort of like a marriage between the two. And for me, it has raised my curiosity. It's allowed me to, absorb all types of information and come to conclusions that may not even be possible. But I'm open to all of it, man. And we've hit just about an hour here,
Yeah.
and man, I'm so appreciative of your time. You've helped me to navigate this realm that I'm trying to get through a lot more accurately, and I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, I'm glad. This was fun. I mean, I just enjoy when people ask me questions. That's one thing that I like. I beg people to do whenever I'm trying to create, STEAM content. I'm like, just ask me questions like that. That makes me happy. I love engagement with people and, possibly not only me explaining something to them, but also trying to understand how other people are perceiving reality. So maybe I can shift my ideology on certain things because obviously I'm not a know-it-all, right? Like I love the interaction between it because it just bolsters my I guess it bolsters my knowledge and my experience in life. So I love it. I love what I do, and I'm happy to come on and talk to you, Josh. It's been great.
Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate you, man. Before we head out here, is there anything you'd like to promote, plug?
Yeah, I mean, so there's one thing that I'm trying to do with a good friend of mine. We started like a clothing line, and where we're trying to, obviously, like, money's always the problem, right? Where we're trying to go into a sustainable clothing line that envelops education, sustainability, and fashion. And one thing that you know about the fashion industry is it's just god awful for the
Mhm.
environment. I mean, obviously, like, fast fashion's god awful. Thrift, first of all, thrift if you can. But we started something called EcoLite, where we're taking right now organic materials. We're going to switch to reusing organic materials, or just material, like even just trying to flip clothing into recycled clothing into something new and fashionable, where you have like a symbol on a shirt, right? Say like we have like a saving the bees shirt, and there's a QR code on the sleeve that can take you right to a research blog that I wrote myself and had peer reviewed by other people, and you can learn about the topic and get engaged, have an understanding of what's going on in reality, and then also having some specific call to actions that make sense to the individual. So it's fashion, it's learning, and it's sustainability. Obviously, sustainability is something that you have to work towards. Sustainability is not something that's completely set from day one. So we have a lot of goals that we would like to make, but I try to plug that as much as possible over my podcast because people love fashion. But yeah, definitely. And then also, if you want to listen to my podcast, I try to have different people on, every 2 weeks where we discuss an interesting topic, and it gives you kind of a light of what they're doing, and just a new and interesting and applicable science that helps propel society. So yeah.
Beautiful, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. I'd be interested to have you on, or even come back onto this podcast sometime. So it was
Yeah,
fun.
for sure. Yeah, I'd love to come on yours, and I'd love to have you back. So.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Josh.